Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the headlines this hour. The Syrian rebel leader has met with the outgoing Prime Minister to coordinate a transfer of power. Meanwhile, Israel has seized Golan Heights after Syrian troops deserted the strategic border location. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu takes the stand for the first time in his corruption trial, facing charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust. The testimony comes amid the war in Gaza and regional tensions. Meanwhile, Netanyahu vows to continue the war in Gaza, saying halting now would lead to a Hamas rebuild. This comes as health officials report dozens of deaths in Gaza and a power outage that threatens hospital patients. Taiwan says China has deployed its largest navy fleet in nearly 30 years, with 47 aircraft and 12 warships spotted in a single day. This marks a new escalation in the regional tensions. Nearly 200 people have been killed in Haiti in an attack targeting voodoo practitioners. Officials condemn the unbearably cruel as gang violences continue to grip Port-au-Prince. Luigi Mangione, aged 26, has been charged with the murder in the fatal shooting of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. NYPD also charges him with multiple weapons and forgery offences. India's Foreign Secretary visits Bangladesh amid rising tensions against the Hindu minority in the country. This has come after ISKCON monk Chinmoy Krishna Das was arrested on a sedition charge. An arrest has been made in retaliation to the murder of United Health executive Brian Thompson. This ends a nationwide 5-day manhunt by United States Police. A 26-year-old suspect was arrested by police in Pennsylvania after he was spotted eating in McDonald's by an employee. Let's have a look at the reports.
A suspect has been arrested and charged with the murder of United Health executive Brian Thompson. The suspect has been identified as Louis Mangione, after Thompson was shot with a ghost gun and silencer in Manhattan, New York.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Earlier this morning in Altoona, Pennsylvania, members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen, targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan.
The action brought an end to an intense 5-day manhunt for the suspected killer. The 26-year-old suspect was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after he was spotted eating in a nearby McDonald's by a customer and an employee who believed he resembled the gunman. Authorities found fraudulent IDs and a document possibly indicating the suspect's potential motivation. Pennsylvania police have charged Mangione for possession of a loaded firearm, along with possession of a forged instrument and criminal possession of a weapon. Investigators continue to interrogate the suspect in New York, where he also faces charges after he was transported from Pennsylvania.
The interview, he was initially cooperative. He is not now. And so he has been arraigned and transported and will be securely housed pending the filing of additional charges in New York.
Luigi Nicholas Mangione attended an elite Baltimore prep school, graduating in 2016, where he then went on to attend and earn a degree in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania. Mangione is next due to appear in court on December the 23rd in Pennsylvania. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some of the news updates from across North America. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that Islamic State could exploit Syria's post-Assad turmoil to rebuild. Speaking after the rebels seized Damascus and Assad fled to Russia, Blinken stressed the US's commitment to preventing an ISIS resurgence. He highlighted the risks of instability and called for Syrians to build an inclusive government. The United States launched airstrikes targeting ISIS to counter threats. Blinken vowed continued protection for US personnel amid Syria's uncertain future. Canada's Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland will unveil the full economic statement on the 16th of December, focusing on deficit reduction, fiscal anchors and spending measures. The update comes as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces heightened political uncertainty after losing NDP support, coupled with US tariff threats under President-elect Donald Trump. Freeland aims to cap the 2023 to 24 deficit at 40.1 billion Canadian dollars while maintaining the debt to GDP ratio below 1% by 2026 to 27. Critics, however, cite slowing growth and election year spending pressures as challenges. The announcement coincides with Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem's inflation progress report. A magnitude 5.6 earthquake struck 9 kilometres southwest of La Union, El Salvador late on Sunday, as reported by the Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Centre. Salvadoran civil protection activated emergency protocols following the tremors, which were felt as far as Honduras. As parts of Nicaragua, an aftershock magnitude of 4.4 followed 7 minutes later. No immediate reports of damage or casualties have been released. A bushfire near Pepperdine University burned 2.8 square miles of land known as the Franklin Fire. Over 6,000 people and 2,000 structures were evacuated. Santa Ana winds with gusts of up to 65 miles per hour worsened the situation. Classes were cancelled and a shelter-in-place order was issued. Helicopters dropped water as flames neared the campus. The Supreme Court hears a case on Utah's Uinta Basin Railway focusing on environmental regulations. Justice Gorsuch recused himself due to ties with a Colorado billionaire linked to the project. The proposed 88-mile railway could quadruple oil production but faces opposition over wildfire risks and spill concerns. A federal court overturned its approval last year. Developers argue for fewer environmental reviews, while Biden officials defend moderate regulations. The ruling may reshape federal powers on environmental laws. Florida will hold 2 special elections to fill congressional seats vacated by Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz, tapped for Trump's top cabinet. After 24 candidates, including CFO Jimmy Patronis, are vying for the seats, creating ripple effects across Floridian politics. Gaetz and Waltz's districts, known for strong Republican support, could see heated races. Trump has already endorsed his preferred successor, Jimmy Patronis, amplifying the stakes for 2026 and beyond. In the wake of sectarian violence in Haiti's capital, nearly 200 lives have been lost as gangs targeted voodoo practitioners. This has sparked global condemnation and calls for international intervention. Let's have a look at this report.
Approximately 200 people were murdered over the weekend in Haiti in a wave of brutal violence. The victims of this brutality were reportedly the voodoo community. As per the Committee for Peace and Development, the violence that took place in Cité Soleil neighbourhood of the capital city of Port-au-Prince was directed by an influential gang leader. The National Human Rights Defence Network said the gang leader had targeted them after consulting a voodoo priest who blamed elderly locals for practising witchcraft that caused gang leader's son's mysterious illness and subsequent death. Armed groups orchestrated coordinated attacks, targeting individuals accused of practicing voodoo to seek a personal revenge. Felix, also known as King Misano, and his members used machetes and knives in the massacre. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned this attack, describing it as horrific violence. Secretary-General's spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, confirmed the number of individuals killed. All the dead bodies were incinerated and disposed of in the sea. The office of Prime Minister Alex Didier Fil-Aime has condemned the gory incident, calling it an act of barbarity of unbearable cruelty. The statement further emphasised that this monstrous crime constitutes a direct attack on humanity. The request for immediate international assistance to address the aggravating security crisis has been made. The country has been plagued by gang-controlled violence, political instability and economic hardship. Multiple human rights groups have also expressed concerns over the rising sectarian tensions and gang violence. Bureau reports, NewsX.
Now let's have a look at some stories from across Europe. A total of 6 people are said to have died in the Hague building collapse following an explosion and fire that destroyed an apartment block. Victims include a 17-year-old girl with identification complicated by intense flames. Police suspect a possible criminal act. Search efforts have concluded while 4 injured individuals remain hospitalised. 2 are in a serious condition. Spain's King Felipe and Queen Letizia attended a memorial mass in Valencia for the 230 victims of the recent floods. Returning to the region, they were met with applause, which was in sharp contrast to earlier anger when they were pelted with mud over inadequate aid. Valencia, hardest hit by the disaster on the 29th of October, hosted the solemn ceremony in the Cathedral of Valencia, honouring the lives lost. Britain, Germany, France, Italy and other European nations announced a freeze on remaining Syrian asylum requests after President Bashar Assad's ouster. Austria signalled plans to deport refugees back to Syria as far-right politicians across Europe called for similar measures. The issue has intensified immigration discussions, especially in Germany, home to Europe's largest Syrian community. The European nations are closely monitoring the unfolding events in Syria. French President Emmanuel Macron called cross-party talks with an emphasis on forming a government of national interest after Prime Minister Michel Barnier's departure intensified a political crisis. Party leaders are to meet at the Elysee Palace. This marks a shift in Macron's usual method of meeting politicians individually. Parliament remains deadlocked, divided between the left, centrists and far right since July's snap election. Austria is dropping its veto on Bulgaria and Romania's full membership to Europe's Schengen. This grants them full access to free travel and trade zones. The air and maritime border checks between Romania, Bulgaria and the other 27 Schengen countries were lifted earlier. However, land entry negotiations with Austria continued into 2024 over its concern about illegal immigrants crossing borders. Britain and Germany signed a joint action plan to combat migrant smuggling gangs. European ministers gathered in London to strengthen cooperation. The UK faces rising irregular migration, with nearly 34,000 undocumented migrants crossing the English Channel this year alone. This makes 2024 the deadliest on record, with at least 70 fatalities. Net legal migration reached 728,000 by June 2024. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu takes the stand for the first time in his long-running corruption trial. As he faces allegations of bribery, fraud and breach of trust, Netanyahu's testimony unfolds against the backdrop of a war with Hamas, shaking Israel's political and judicial foundations. Here is the report.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is at the centre of 2 critical battles, a war with Hamas and a corruption trial that's divided the nation. Protesters flood the streets outside a Tel Aviv courtroom as Netanyahu testifies for the first time in his high-stakes corruption trial. The crowds are divided. On one side, pro-Netanyahu demonstrators holding banners claiming he's a victim of political persecution. On the other, anti-Netanyahu activists demanding accountability and his resignation. For the first time since 2020, Netanyahu has taken the stand to defend himself against accusations of bribery, fraud, and a breach of trust. The stakes could not be higher.
אני שמעתי בתקשורת שאומרים שאני רוצה להתחמק מהמשפט. שמעתם את זה? כן. אני רוצה להתחמק. 8 שנים אני מחכה לחשוף את השיטה. שיטה של מסע ציד אכזרי, כי החקירות האלה נולדו בחטא. לא הייתה עבירה, אז חיפשו עבירה. לא מצאו עבירה, אז המציאו עבירה.
The charges span 3 high-profile cases, known as cases 1000, 2000 and 4000. They include allegations of receiving lavish gifts, striking deals for favourable media coverage and granting regulatory favours. In case 1000, Netanyahu allegedly accepted $300,000 worth in gifts, including cigars and champagne, in exchange for political favours. The Prime Minister denies these claims. Case 2000 accuses Netanyahu of negotiating a quid pro quo with a prominent newspaper for positive coverage, while Case 4000 alleges he influenced telecom policies to benefit his allies.
8 שנים אני מחכה להציג את האמת. 8 שנים אני מחכה לפוצץ סופית את ההאשמות ההזויות והמופרכות שכוונו נגדי.
Israel's testimony comes as Israel battles Hamas in Gaza, adding pressure to an already volatile political climate. Critics accuse him of using the war to delay the trial. The trial has exposed deep divisions in Israel. Supporters see Netanyahu as a victim of a political witch hunt, while opponents demand his resignation, calling him unfit to lead. As Israel grapples with war and political upheaval, Netanyahu's trial underscores questions about accountability and leadership in one of its most crucial moments. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. Around 87,000 people have been evacuated in central Philippines on Tuesday. This comes a day after a volcano briefly erupted. The eruption sent a towering ash plume and super-hot streams of gas and debris down its western slopes. The latest eruption of Mount Canlon and central Negros Island has not caused any immediate casualties. However, the alert level has been raised by 1. South Korean prosecutors are seeking to arrest the former Defence Minister Kim Yong-hyun. The former minister is accused of colluding with President Yoon Suk-yeol. They are accused of trying to impose martial law last week. The law, which lasted only 6 hours, sparked protests and investigations into Yoon and his associates. The Justice Ministry has imposed a travel ban on Yoon and 8 others. This marks the first time a sitting president in South Korea has faced such a ban. US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in Japan on Tuesday. He's meeting with officials to reaffirm the importance of the US-Japan alliance. He's also reaffirming the commitment to regional security amid rising threats from China and North Korea. His visit also comes as concerns grow over the safety of Osprey military aircraft. The Osprey aircraft has been grounded in the US following a near crash at Cannon Air Force Base last month. Minister Anthony Albanese was heckled in chaotic scenes outside a firebombed synagogue in Melbourne. One heckler shouted that it was a nice day for the tennis. Jewish community leaders have urged the public not to heckle the Prime Minister. This came amid anger over his failure to visit the site earlier. However, the crowd inside the synagogue expressed their frustration. Their frustration was especially over his decision to spend the afternoon playing tennis in Perth. One of Myanmar's most powerful ethnic minority armed groups, the Arakan Army, has claimed the capture of the last army outpost. The outpost is located in the strategic western town of Mongdao. The group has gained full control of the 271-kilometre border with Bangladesh. This marks the group's complete control over the northern Rakhine state and represents another advance in its bid for self-rule in the region. New Zealand has announced plans to ban greyhound racing, citing an unacceptably high rate of injuries. The sport has faced long-standing criticism. Some breeders have been accused of mistreating the animals, others have been accused of doping the animals. The government will phase out the industry over the next 20 months. This will allow time to rehome racing dogs. It will also help workers transition to other jobs. Taiwan has detected 47 Chinese military aircraft near the island in the past 24 hours, the highest in a single day since hostilities between the nations began intensifying. Tensions are rising amid speculation over Taiwan's recent US visits. Here is the report.
在过去这一天里面，我们的今天的新闻稿里面也看到，有大概47架飞机是在那个区域活动。
In a developing story, Taiwan has reported detecting 47 Chinese military aircraft and 12 warships near the island in the past 24 hours. This marks the highest number of Chinese military aircraft in a single day since Beijing launched large-scale war games 2 months ago.
我们是以目前这一次的这个 规模跟前面这4次来去做比较，是最大的，是相当大的。
Speculation has been growing over the possibility of China launching new military exercises in response to Taiwanese President Lai Chang-te's visit to the United States last week. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry has confirmed that its forces remain on high alert. Additionally, the People's Liberation Army has reserved airspace off China's east coast. Taiwan continues to assert itself as a sovereign nation with its government, military and currency. However, Beijing insists that Taiwan is part of its territory and has not ruled out the use of force to bring the island under its control.
Let's now take a look at some stories from the world of business. European stock markets dropped after Seoul rebounded. This comes as traders focused on political upheaval in France and South Korea. The focus was also on China's latest stimulus plans. Commodity markets were steadier after oil and gold won strong support. This was due to an uncertain future for Syria and the wider crude-rich Middle East. The Paris stock market retreated as French party leaders were set to gather at the Élysée Palace office to chart a route towards a new government. Car giant Stellantis and Chinese manufacturer CATL would build a $4.3 billion factory for electric vehicle batteries. Both companies said they aim to start producing by the end of 2026 in Spain. The two firms had signalled an agreement in 2023 to produce battery parts for the manufacture of electric vehicles in Europe. CATL has launched 2 other European factories in Germany and Hungary. This comes at a turbulent time for the car industry as countries seek to switch to low-carbon electric vehicles. France's largest internet operator, Orange, was on Tuesday slapped with a €50 million fine. This was for sending unsolicited adverts resembling emails to customers. Orange is the leading telecom firm in France with a popular email service. Advertisers in France are required to obtain permission before sending materials to a person's email address. Data protection agency CINL said that more than 7.8 million users received unsolicited ads. Orange said it would appeal against the fine to top administrative courts. Chinese President Xi Jinping warned that there would be no winners in a trade war with the United States. He vowed the country would hit its growth goals for the year. He said this in a meeting with heads of multilateral financial institutions in Beijing. Xi also expressed willingness to maintain dialogue with the US. This comes as US President-elect Donald Trump pledged to impose higher tariffs on China after taking office. Air passenger numbers are forecasted to top 5 billion for the first time next year. The sector's revenues will also break the $1 trillion barrier as per the global aviation body IATA. These totals, industry revenues, will be helped by falling oil and fuel prices. Airfares and airlines revenue sources other than ticketing are expected to fall by 3.4% in 2025. Demand in the Asia-Pacific region, the largest market globally, will continue to rise. After the rebels took over Syria and President Assad fled, the transitional power talks have commenced. The rebel leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jalani, has met with outgoing Prime Minister Mohammed al-Jalali. Meanwhile, Israel have seized the Golan Heights after the Syrian army abandoned it. How are the dynamics changing? Let's take a look.
After taking over the power in Syria, the rebel leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jalani, met with outgoing Syrian Prime Minister Mohammed al-Jalali and discussed the transfer of power. Mohammed Bashir, who heads the rebels' salvation government in their northwest Syria bastion, was also in attendance. Bashir's name has been circulating as the most likely candidate for Prime Minister in the transitional post-Assad administration. Amid the ongoing leadership talks in Syria, Assad's downfall has presented an opportunity for Israel. The Israeli military over the weekend began seizing control of the demilitarized Golan Heights buffer zone in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the territory will remain Israeli for eternity.
ולא למרגלות הגולן. השליטה שלנו ברמת הגולן מבטיחה את ביטחוננו, היא מבטיחה את ריבונותנו. ובהזדמנות זאת אני רוצה להודות לידידי, לנשיא הנבחר דונלד טראמפ על שנענה לבקשתי להכיר בריבונות ישראל על רמת הגולן ב-2019.
Israel had earlier said that the actions were only meant to defend its borders. The United States had also reiterated the same, calling the actions temporary.
The second thing that is important is that Israel has said that these actions are temporary to defend its borders. These are not permanent actions. And so ultimately, what we want to see is lasting stability between Israel and Israel and Syria. And that means we support all sides upholding the 1974 disengagement agreement.
The buffer zone in discussion was created by the UN after the 1973 Middle East War as a part of a ceasefire. Calling the advance a ceasefire violation, the UNDOF peacekeepers have informed the Israeli counterparts that there should be no military forces or activities in the area of separation. At the same time, Israeli warplanes have carried out dozens of attacks across the country, including the capital, Damascus. There were more than 100 strikes on military targets. Israel says that it is acting to stop weapons from falling into the hands of extremists following the overthrow of the Assad regime. Meanwhile, families desperately scoured the filthy cells of Syria's forbidding Cedena prison for any signs of long-detained relatives after its gates were flung open by rebels. Thousands of prisoners split out of detention, sometimes to tearful reunions with relatives who believed that they had been executed years earlier.
صارنا 12 سنة عم نستنى وما خلينا محل وما رحنا عليه وعم نستنى بلكي الله يفرج عليه.
Rumours have also spread that thousands more inmates were still imprisoned in underground cells that could not be reached. Bureau Report, NewsX.
That is all we have time for. We'll be back shortly with more news updates from across the world.